Yeah. Okay, we'll move ahead on the Treatise on White Magic. Remember, we're on Rule 5. And we've been on Rule 5 for a while. It's quite an extensive rule. Let me read it over again just to refresh your memory on the rule itself. 3 things engage the solar angel before the sheath created passes downward: the condition of the waters, the safety of the one who thus creates, and steady contemplation. Thus are the heart, the throat, and the eye allied for triple service. And what we're on right now is the heart, the throat, and the eye being allied for triple service. And he's talking about the things that the masters look for in a working disciple. In other words, people seem to have this idea that, God or the masters or Christ really don't need us. That they're just doing all the work behind the scenes, and we don't have to do anything but just wait upon the Lord, type of thing. What do you think of this idea? Do you think that's an illusion or not? Are we needed?
Of course.
Yeah.
Part of the plan.
Yeah, after all, who are the arms and legs and eyes and mind of God on the earth? Is it us? Remember the parable Jesus gave of the Good Samaritan? How a person was injured and several really religious people came forward of his own religion and just walked around him and didn't help him. And a Samaritan, who is normally an enemy to the Jews, came across the guy who was a Jew and was supposed to be his enemy, but instead he helped him out. And he brought him to an inn and paid the innkeeper some money to take care of him and said, if this isn't enough, go ahead and do what you have to do, and I'll make it good later on next time I come by. And Jesus said, which one of these guys was really the good neighbor to the Samaritan? And the people listening said, well, the guy that really helped him, even though he was supposed to be an enemy to the Samaritan. And Jesus said, go and do likewise. So we are the arms and legs of God. And one of the thoughts I gave a while back was basically said that how many times in your life have people said, thank God because of something you actually did? And in this case of the Good Samaritan, the guy he helped was probably was thanking God for what the Good Samaritan did. Yet it wasn't God that came down and directly did it. It was the good neighbor that did it. And when the guy thanked God, it was God expressing himself through another human being. And almost every time that people do utter the phrase thank God, it's because of something some other human being did that was kind of tuning into the mind of God in such a way that they were expressing the love of God. Well, even if you're driving along and somebody's having car problems and you help them out, help them change the tire or whatever, just little incidents like that, when you're gone, they may say, thank God. Thank God that guy showed up, You are the arms and legs of God that made that happen. And so that's an important point to remember, is that God does need us, because God is not right here in the physical assisting every human being on the earth. That's up to us to do it as agents of God. And what does an agent of God do? He tunes in to the spirit within, picks up what he's supposed to do, and then when he does it, somebody out there is going to be saying, thank God for that guy. Thank God he showed up. Thank God old Rick showed up with his RV just at the right time. Or whatever, whatever it happens. So it's important that we look on ourselves as agents, and we come to the realization that oftentimes if we don't do something to make something happen, it just doesn't get done. And this is a big problem we have in the world today. A lot of people just leaving everything up to God. And if everything was left up to God, why did he even create us? We wouldn't even be here if everything was up to God to come down and do everything for us. And I've talked to so many people lately that just seem to think that they don't need to do anything until God surfaces and makes clear what needs to be done, or God's going to come do something. So they sit around and do nothing because they're expecting God to bring the millennial age of peace, or to bring Zion, or to bring wonderful things on the earth. And if we do anything, we're more interfering than anything. So a lot of these really religious people see people that are really trying to be the arms and legs of God, they see them as interfering rather than agents of God. And so those who claim to be closest to the Spirit and to be spokesmen for God are often those who get in the way most. I always go back to that Bruce Willis movie, Die Hard, the first one, where all the authorities were in his way, and he tells the authorities, hey, you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And this is often the case of those who are telling us what to do and preaching to us. They're often not part of the solution, they're often part of the problem, which is kind of sad. The next thing, one of the things the master looks for in a working disciple is his karma. Why do you suppose karma is a factor in how useful a disciple is? What do you think about that? Who can we pick on here?
pick on Rick.
Yeah. Well, Rick, why do you think karma is a factor in with a disciple, whether or not he's useful for the hierarchy?
Well, if you're going to help somebody out, help them up a rank or something, from God to God, you can only give them what they're ready for, because ultimately they're the ones that have to make the decision. And there's nothing worse. I think for the masters, they probably think there's nothing worse than people always saying, well, Master J says this, or Master R says that. It's like that doesn't matter as much as how do you interpret and how do you incorporate what the masters say into your own personal life and lifestyle with what you do, how you teach. Are you creative? Are you trying to be one with God? If you're one with God, basically, you're a creator. What are you creating?
Right. Okay.
What does God think about it? You're constantly thinking like, well, if I was God, how would I look at this? And it does. It makes a big difference. Big difference. When you see a bigger picture, when you try to think like God.
And Rulina, let's get your input here. What do you think that sometimes in your life that maybe something beyond your control because of karma prevented you from doing everything you wanted to do?
Yeah, it seems like I've really been experiencing a lot of clearing of past untruthful programming, I guess, and that was preventing me from perhaps fulfilling my highest potential. And once I clear it, it feels like I've really felt this new freedom that I am able to serve more and to function at a higher level, both spiritually, emotionally, mentally, things like that.
Yeah, in my astrological chart, I have a lot of negative energy connected with Saturn that tells me that I have to correct some of my errors in past lives before I can have all the spiritual power that I need to accomplish the mission in this life. And so hopefully I've got most of that out of the way, but you never know.
What's your sense of that, JJ? Sorry to interrupt.
Well, I feel I'm getting close to clearing out all the negative Saturn energy, but the tripping point hasn't actually come yet. But I feel like I'm getting close.
Do you have any, I mean, I guess you probably can't go into the specifics, but do you have any kind of the general principle of the thing or something like that of your understanding of it and what that is?
What do you mean by that? The general?
Well, it sounds like you're saying there's some sort of karma you need to work through from past mistakes. You have kind of an idea of what that is or where you're at with it or what it involves for you to clear it or anything?
Yeah, well, remember I told you the story. Curtis and I went to the psychic and she said I was a initiate back in Egypt and I misused my powers. Now, I don't necessarily go by her story completely, but I think she picked up some elements of truth there in the fact that I picked up there's certain things that I have needed cleared out. I think I cleared a lot out in a past life. The only past life I revealed to the group was that of being Stauffenberg in the days of Hitler. And I think that life was given to me to realize what it was like to live under a true Antichrist authority. And I think that taught me a great lesson to clear up a lot of, misdirection I have had in past lives. And I think that was a big step forward in that life to clear the way for the future. And still in my astrological chart in this life, it showed a lot of Saturn energy to overcome and balance off quite a few squares. But then I have the Star of David in there, which is a really rare sign of spiritual power that will be available if I'm able to clear up all that negative Saturn energy. And Saturn is a disciplinarian of the natal chart. And so it disciplines us. And when we are subject to the discipline and learn the lessons, then we can go into greater freedom. And so hopefully I know I've made some progress in this life. Hopefully I've made enough to accomplish what my soul wants me to do. Okay, any other comments or questions?
Well, good luck, JJ. And may the force be with you.
Thanks, Joshua. Okay, so yeah, our past karma has affected me in this life, and it affects all of us to some degree. And this is what the masters have to look for. Maybe the person has tremendous potential, but he's got several things he just got to work out. And before he really is able to be an effective servant and tool in the hands of higher lives. So we need to always be aware of what our next step is, and this is the purpose of soul contact. Is if you make contact with your soul will always tell you what your next step is. And so be aware, tune in to what your next step is. And if you take your next step and do it successfully, then your next step will be revealed. And one thing he points out is good character is not enough. There's a lot of good people out there in the world. And the religious people say you have to be humble and nice and courteous and kind and loving and all these things. And then Jesus will love you and accept you. It's not quite that simple. Being a decent person is helpful in the fact that it conditions the lives that are within you. And this is something a lot of people don't realize, is that we are a composite of many smaller lives. Each cell in your body is a smaller life. Each atom in your body is a smaller life. And each organ in your body is a smaller life. And also you have 7 centers in your body, and each of them is a composite of numerous lives. And as you develop good character, this influences all the lesser lives in your body in a positive way and makes them more in tune. If you develop bad character and are very selfish, then this energizes these lower lives, so they actually take a lot more control. Your job is to control these lower lives. Now, you can actually feel these lower lives if you focus. Next time you get very angry, say you drop an anvil on your toe or something like that, and you feel very angry, and you start cussing or whatever, if you just stop for a minute and relax, you can feel in your lower centers these lives just moving around. You can just feel that if you tune into them. And these lower lives need control by you. They are not supposed to control, but you are supposed to control. If you allow these lower lives to control, they can lead to selfishness, to outbursts, to negative feelings, hate, anger, to dominate. But the way it is you are supposed to control these lesser lives. As you develop good character, the lesser lives in your body are under control, and they actually like being controlled because they're fulfilling their destiny when they're controlled by someone higher than themselves, which is you. And when you control them, they become more refined and more cooperative. And so it's interesting to think of yourself as a composite of many lesser lives, of which you are their God, so to speak, and you must take charge of them rather than them taking charge of you. Another thing they look for in a disciple is
JJ,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt. Maria has a question down there.
Okay, what was it? Where is it? I don't see it. If anybody sees it, read it to me.
She says, JJ, can you clarify about all the rage and the aversion around Trump and, let's see, and what he is about?
Well, that's a big that's a big subject, but a lot of people are enraged by Trump for no apparent reason, merely because they disagree with him. And so this happened with Obama. With conservatives were enraged by Obama, but they didn't go marching in the streets like the anti-Trump people. They weren't so demonstrative. And so it's all one of the things that Tibetan says is one of the important things each disciple must learn is to just accept what is. Okay, Trump is president. Um, they're not accepting what is. And so life is a lot more peaceful if you accept what is and then work to change what you don't like. And instead of just letting it completely destroy your life by creating fires of negativity within you, which seems to be happening to a lot of people these days. I mean, there's people marching in the streets, overturning police cars, breaking windows of businesses, uh, marching into places where conservatives are speaking and preventing them from speaking, threatening their lives. And these people, a lot of these people are just going crazy. And so these, if the all the disciples or those in tune with the higher energies need to realize that to accept what is and then work peacefully to change what they do not like. And as far as who's right and who's wrong, that's a different matter. But doesn't matter who's right or who's wrong. If you resort to violence, you're definitely in the wrong, unless except for extreme cases where you're actual war of some kind. Okay, any other comments or questions there before we move ahead? One of the things outside of the character, and the character is like developing good character is like graduating from kindergarten or the first grade. I mean, that's the basics. That's the basics of discipleship. And a lot of the religious people think that's the whole thing. No, that's not the whole thing. That's just the first step. The first step is to develop good character, be humble, not have so much pride, be loving, and all these things where you have good character. That's the first step. Like I would say everybody that's in this group that we have right here, you are all people with good character. You're all loving. You're all willing to help your neighbor when they need it, that type of thing. And so you guys are ready for your next step. And the good character is just one step. After this, they look for somebody with ability and influence. He says, until the disciple develops his talents, he must learn from his own soul, from books and teachers. Okay, so we don't all have a master coming down telling us what to do. Very few of us lived in the days of Jesus where he gathered disciples around him and told them how to move ahead. Very few of us have even somebody like Socrates to give us instruction. But he says the disciple must make use of what he has available. And if he makes use of what he has available, he will learn from his own soul. He'll find the best books and the best teachers he can find and learn everything that's out there to learn. That's what is expected of us until we make some actual higher spiritual contact that maybe guides us in a maybe different direction than we expected. And he makes this important point is oftentimes if you feel you're having a difficult life, if you're not going anywhere, if you have all kinds of roadblocks, he says this type of life may be just preparation for the next life. And oftentimes this is the case. If you're having a difficult life, that's not necessarily a sign that you're not ready or anything, or you're not advanced. You could be quite an advanced person, but you just have some karma to work out, and you're working out karma now to prepare for greater service in the next life. It might even be 2 lives down the road, who knows? But they say everybody's entitled to 15 minutes of fame. Well, every disciple is entitled to 15 minutes of actually having unrestricted service so that he can really get things done in the service of the will of God. Actually, it'll be more than 15 minutes, but once we arrive there, we can, and don't create more negative karma, we can have much more than the 15 minutes of unrestricted service. He says the master looks at conditions of health, the physical, astral, and mental bodies. The disciple must be healthy enough to handle the forces, the ego, the master, and his group. Now, why is this important? And how will the spiritual forces cause the problems in the disciple who's unstable? Does anyone know the answer to that? Do spiritual forces sometimes cause problems, even good forces?
JJ, I think I can answer that.
Okay.
You one time said that all pain is a resistance of energy. And I think that if a disciple is receiving a new kind of energy and they resist it, then it ends up hurting them. And also, if you're focused on your physical body or the pain of your physical body or any injury of your physical body, it makes it that much more difficult to focus on higher spiritual events or things.
Right. All pain is caused by resistance of some type. And for instance, as the different spiritual energies unfold in your centers, they release energy. And the energy is released a little bit at a time. Because if it's released in too large of a quantity, it's so overpowering that it produces a lot of problems in the disciple. But when it is released, you will feel impulses to do certain things. For instance, when the heart center begins to open in the you have 12 petals of the heart center. Now each petal, when it unfolds, releases a different type of energy. And when the energies related to spiritual love begin to unfold, and you resist that spiritual love and focus on the more carnal, selfish love, then what the person will often develop heart problems, because that's the resistance to the higher love. Now, a very carnal person that isn't very evolved won't have this problem very much, because he doesn't have these energies even being released. But when the disciple has these energies being released, then he's a lot more in danger of having various types of heart problems than the person of a lower evolution and lower consciousness. Okay. So the disciple has to be healthy enough to handle all the forces being released. Now, one of the things that helps us here is to just take good care of our physical bodies. Have a good diet where you are on foods that supply a lot of vital energy. Now, these include as many raw foods as you can eat. It's good to eat. I eat one great big salad every day of just raw vegetables, because raw living vegetables have a lot of life energy. Fruits are always good. You want to drink clean water. A lot of tap water isn't very good because it has a lot of chlorine, and some of it has a lot of impurities and chemicals in it. So I filter all the water I drink. I use what is called zero filters. That takes everything out, and then after I take everything out, I put some good trace minerals back in that I know are quality. And so then the air you breathe, try to get good fresh air. If your air isn't good in your house, get an air purifier. But make sure that, and also exercise. My wife keeps telling me I don't get enough exercise. I do exercise a reasonable amount, but she's really big on it compared to me. So she's and it seems to be working well for her. But make sure your physical body is in good shape. This is important. Matter of fact, DK says in the schools where they do strong esoteric training, they say one of the important factors is your physical body has enough stamina to be able to handle everything involved in the training. So keep yourselves in as good a shape as possible. And if if you do have a lot of physical problems, every physical problem you have is a lesson of some kind where there's something to be learned. And so learn what you can from it. And sometimes, unfortunately, we have to just put up with certain things for the rest of our life and in preparation for the next life. And for many of us, that's the case. Is this life is a preparation for a more significant life to come, where you will have greater energy and power to perform. Now he says people you're linked to is also a factor, and that is important. And speaking of service, he says true service is the spontaneous outflow of a loving heart and an intelligent mind. It is a result of being in the right place and staying there. It is produced by the inevitable flow of spiritual force and not by the strenuous physical plane activity. It is the effect of a man's being what he truly is, a divine son of God, and not by a studied effect of his words or deeds. A true server gathers around him those whom it is his duty to serve and aid by the forces of his life and his spiritual personality, and not by his claims or loud speaking. In self-forgetfulness, he serves. In self-abnegation, he walks the earth, and he gives no thought to the magnitude or the reverse of his accomplishments, and has no preconceived ideas as to his own value or usefulness. He lives, he serves, he works, and influences, asking nothing for the separated self. Yeah, it says a true server gathers around him those to whom it is his duty to serve. And you guys are gathered around me, so I guess it's my duty to serve you guys. So it's also interesting. He says he lives, he works, he influences, asking nothing for the separated self. And he has no preconceived ideas as to his own value or usefulness. That's kind of hard for a lot of people. A lot of people want to think of themselves as being a great one, a master, mighty and strong, a new Messiah. And that's the tendency of a lot of teachers, want to present themselves as a great holy one, come to save the world. Where he says the true servant has no preconceived ideas as to his own value or usefulness. And so it's a little bit like the parable Jesus gave about in the days of Jesus, if you were invited to a function, a big dinner or something, your guests were seated according to how recognizable they were and how important they were. And so the most important guests were seated next to the person holding the event. And he says, if you think you're important and then you wind up sitting in the most important chair, and then the host comes to you and says, no, you don't belong here, you belong in the least important chair, he says it's going to be extremely embarrassing to you. So when you come to the table, he says, sit in the most humble station. And then if the host comes to you and says, no, you don't belong in the most humble station, come up higher, he says, and it will be a glory for you. So he says, always assume, Jesus basically taught, always assume that the most humble station, and then if you are deserving of coming up higher, you will be invited. And so I think that's an interesting parable to assume. So no matter how great we think we are, we should always assume that the most humble stance. And if circumstances or authority or God or some event calls us higher, then it will be a wonderful thing. Whereas extremely embarrassing if you're told, no, you don't belong there, you're just you belong in the servants' quarters over here. Okay, now we get to the heart, the throat, the eye. He says, we must consider the following: the heart center, the throat center, and the center between the eyes. These are the three important centers in white magic. They're the higher correspondences to the lower centers that we'll discuss. Says it's important that we put stimulus on their awakening and to what they will be used for in the coming world cycle. These centers must be mastered and employed before any true creative work is possible. Okay, the basic centers all have petals. They're like, he says, they're like lotuses, and they all have different colors to them. But we're just going to talk about the petals here. First of all, the first center is at the base of the spine. It's the center of life. It's where life in the physical body originates. And the life energy extends from the center of the base of the spine to the crown at the top of the head. And the base of the spine has 4 energy petals. The sacral center, which governs the physical sex, has 6 petals. The solar plexus, which governs the lower emotions, has 10 petals. The heart center, which governs higher spiritual love and wisdom, has 12 petals. The throat center, which governs the creative energies, has 16 petals. And the center between the eyebrows has 2 major petals composed of 48 smaller petals on each one. So altogether it has 96 petals. And then the head center has approximately, the crown of the head has 1,000 petals. And it has a higher correspondence of the heart center in the head center. So 12 of those 1,000 petals, lotus, is composed of a higher correspondence of the heart center. So when we think of the heart center, we often think of just emotional energy, but remember the heart center is composed of love and wisdom. Half of the centers are dedicated to spiritual love, and half of them focus on wisdom. And the wisdom is very closely connected to the mind. So the heart and the mind are very closely connected because of the wisdom, and also because the heart center has a duplicate in the crown of the head. And so this makes the heart and the mind and the head very much a unity where they're all cooperating together. You have a lot of New Agers tell us we need to become mindless and just overcome the mind and focus completely on the heart. But the heart is strongly linked to the mind and the head. So you just can't focus on emotion or feeling and negate the mind, because the heart is a large part of the mind itself. So they're not two distinct things, so to speak. The disciple must learn to function consciously through the higher centers and subordinate the lower centers. The centers are divided into two categories. There are three centers below the diaphragm, which is the base of the spine, the sacral, and the solar plexus. These are the lower centers, and the higher correspondences are the heart, the throat, and the head centers. The higher must be awakened through some and brought from a state of negativity into that of positivity. So the base of the spine is the lower correspondence to the head centers. And so the base of the spine, through purity of living, this is what living the good life, is taught in all the churches, to be a good person, to be loving and kind and humble, and all these things that they tell us to do. This helps to raise up the lower energy at the base of the spine up to the head, so you have a flow of energy going up and down the spine. It produces a spiritual flow. And this is like I said, graduating from kindergarten or the first grade. When this happens, when you just become a good, decent person, so you subject these lower energies, so you create this spiritual flow between the lowest and the highest that's in you. The second thing is the throat center, or the lifting up the energies of the sacral center to the throat. And this happens when control of the sexual energy is assumed by the disciple. And the sexual energy is very powerful, but it must be sublimated and controlled, so it's lifted up to the throat. And once lifted up to the throat, then the creative force focuses on constructive things that you can do in the world of form to create positive change. If it's focused entirely in the sacral center, then the person is only interested in using that energy for sexual satisfaction. Now, it doesn't mean that the person has to negate sexual satisfaction, but it means that he must put it under the right control. And this is part of the purposes of all the commandments in this various religions about being faithful to your wife, about not going overboard with sex, about not abusing this power. So all these religions teach this, and that's part of the whole plan, is to put the sexual powers under the control of the disciple, so that he uses it rightly. He can use it rightly for the procreation and for romantic love and this type of thing. But as long as it's kept in bounds, then he can lift the creative energies from the sacral center up to the throat, and he can become a much more creative person. He can become a great poet or a great writer, a great thinker, a great painter, by using these energies in a positive way. And this is what the disciple has to learn to do. The final thing to be lifted up is the energies of the solar plexus, which is lower emotion, up to the higher emotion of the pure love of Christ, which is in the heart center. And so the lower emotion has all the negative emotions like fear and greed and selfishness and jealousy and and hate and anger. All these emotions have to be lifted up and transmuted into higher feelings. And so the focus, instead of on the lower emotions, is on the higher emotions of love and wisdom. And uh, instead of, perhaps the most biggest demarcation is from self-love to group love. In other words, instead of just focusing on self, the person focuses on the good of the whole. And this is the sign that the person has lifted up the lower energy of the sacral center, of the solar plexus center up to the heart center. And when these three centers, lower centers, are lifted up and controlled by the higher centers, then the Tibetan says we have a person that may be of use to the spiritual hierarchy and may be a true servant. He says a higher mind must be awakened and brought to a state to form a state of negativity into that of positivity. This has to be brought about in two ways. First, by the transference of the positive energy of the lower centers into that of the higher, and secondly, by the awakening of the head center and by the demonstration of the activity of the will. The first effect is produced by character building and by the purification of the bodies as used by the soul in the three worlds. The second as a result of meditation and the development of organized purpose imposed by the will upon daily life. Okay, any questions? That's basically as far as we're going today, unless there's any questions or comments. So appreciate you guys being here today. We'll end with meditation. Let's see. Let's do the Song of Eternal Life. We can all use some extra energy. If you have this before you, or if you have it memorized, say it along with us. But put your mics on mute so we don't have interference. Sound the Om. Om. We thank you, Father, Mother, Spirit, for the energy of life which streams from universal source to us, for the life that circulates through each atom and cell, permeating our entire bodies and minds, bringing health and vitality to all of our living parts. Can you visualize the point where the will of God holds sway? We are connected to God, all of us. Visualize that connection, and from that connection, life energy links us to God. Visualize that life coming into us, permeating our entire bodies and minds. We bask in this life. We feel the life. We are the life which knows not corruption, the life which makes all things new, the life which always is. Oh. We feel the life from our toes to the top of our heads and give thanks for its abundance. We praise and love our bodies and all their parts for receiving this life and spirit and source. We praise body, mind, soul, and spirit for receiving without ceasing. Ah. Ooh.
Good seeing you coming on aboard, Maria.
JJ, looks
Yeah.
like Eric posted something.
Who
I
did?
just saw it. Eric?
Oh, okay. What'd he say? I don't see a note here anywhere.
Maybe scroll up.
He's talking about the chakras.
Oh, okay.
Starts with the earth chakra at the base of the spine, which deals with survival and is blocked by fear. Then
Yeah.
the water chakra, which deals with pleasure and is blocked by guilt. Then the fire chakra, which deals with willpower and is blocked by shame.
Okay.
Then the air chakra, which deals with love and is blocked by grief. Then the truth chakra, which deals with truth and is blocked by lies. And the ones that we tell ourselves. Let's see.
Okay.
Then the sight chakra, which deals with insight and is blocked by illusion. And finally, the thought chakra at the crown of the head, which deals with cosmic energy and is blocked by earthly attachment.
Okay, well, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, there's a lot of thought put into the chakras and their effects and their dualities, and so that's a good rundown there. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Well, glad everybody showed up. Small group, but a good group, and our next meeting will be next Sunday at 2 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. So be ready to rumble.
I'm enjoying visiting with these people all across the country, keisters, and if I haven't visited you yet, I'm getting there.
Okay, well, Rick, sounds like you're having a good time there. So we'll look forward to